Mr. President, you would think now more than ever our colleagues on the other side of the aisle would recognize that the American people really want us focused squarely on jobs and the economy. It is what every poll says. It's what the vast majority of all of our constituents say, and it is absolutely what is needed at a time when families, especially working women, continue to struggle to make ends meet. But instead of working with us across the aisle to give every American a fair shot, it seems like Republicans are focused on something else entirely: politics. Today, the senior senator from South Carolina came to the floor and attempted to pass a bill that not only undermines women's access to their doctors, but restricts their rights to access reproductive health services. I'm not sure what our colleagues think has changed since they last introduced this bill in November, but just as it was back then, this extreme, unconstitutional abortion ban is an absolute non-starter. It is not going anywhere here in the Senate, and they know it is a cheap political ploy. I'd like to think that over the last 41 years since the historic decision in Roe v. Wade that we've moved on from debating this issue. I'd like to think that after 4 decades, many of those who want to make women's health care decisions for them have come to grips with the fact that Roe v. Wade is settled law. After all, many of the signs of progress are all around us. This Congress, there's a record 20 women serving here in this body. In 2012, women's power and voice at the ballot box was heard pretty loud and clear. In fact, when Republican candidates for office thought that rape was a political talking point, that idea and their candidacies were swiftly rejected, thanks in large part to the voices of women. So sometimes it's tempting to think that the times indeed have changed. That maybe, just maybe, politicians have finally realized that getting between a woman and her doctor is not their job. That it's possible right-wing legislators have a newfound respect for women. But the truth is that the drumbeat of politically driven, extreme, and unconstitutional laws continues to get louder. In 2013, our nation saw yet another record-breaking year of state legislatures passing restrictive legislation barring women's access to abortion services. In fact, in the past 3 years, more of these restrictions have been enacted in this country than in the previous 10 years combined. And anti-choice lawmakers here in our nation's capital have filed 50 legislative attacks on reproductive rights in this Congress alone. These, by the way, haven't just been attacks on a woman's right to choose. It's been an all-out assault on everything from shaming pregnant women to drafting politically driven legislation intended to create geographical roadblocks for low-income and racial minorities wishing to access safe reproductive services. Not surprisingly, these states that have enacted some of the most extreme and archaic restrictions are also the same states that fail to achieve even mediocre standards when it comes to critical issues like education and the economy. But despite these shortcomings, some members of this body refuse to work with us to address those critical issues and instead want to distract the American public with these purely political bills until their small pocket of extreme audience is satisfied. Mr. President, in fact, according to the senator from South Carolina, debating a woman's access to her own doctor, and I quote him, is a debate worthy of a great democracy, unquote. The fact is, it's a debate we've already had. This is a direct attack on Roe v. Wade, and it's an attack on what is already settled law. I'd like to remind my colleagues today that real women's lives and the most difficult healthcare decisions they can ever possibly make are at stake. Let me share with you the story of Judy Nicastro. She's from my home state of Washington. She bravely shared her story publicly in the New York Times. I've told her story before, but it bears repeating now because we're under attack again. In an op-ed she wrote just days before the House passed a bill that was virtually identical to the one that was introduced today, Judy talked about being faced with every pregnant woman's worst nightmare. In describing the news that one of the twins that she was carrying was facing a condition where only one lung chamber had formed and it was only 20% complete, Judy captured the anguish that countless other women in similar positions have faced. "My world stopped," she wrote. "I loved being pregnant with twins and trying to figure out which one was where in my uterus. Sometimes it felt like there was a party in there with 8 limbs moving. The thought of losing one of these children was unbearable." And she went on to say, "The MRI at Seattle Children's Hospital confirmed our worst fears. The organs were pushed up into our boy's chest and not developing properly. We were in the 22nd week." Mr. President, under the bill that was proposed today, the decision Judy ultimately made through very painful conversations with her family and with consultation with her doctors would be illegal. The decision to make sure, as she put it, quote, "our son was not born only to suffer," would be taken from her and given to politicians. Mr. President, I'm here today to provide a simple reality check. We are not going back. We're not going back on settled law like Roe v. Wade or the Affordable Care Act. We're not going to take away a woman's ability to make her own decisions about her own health care and her own body. And just like the many attempts before this bill, there are those out there who would like the American public to believe that all these efforts are anything but an attack on women's health care. They try to say it's a debate about freedom. Well, except, of course, the freedom for women to access care. It's no different than when we are told attacks on abortion rights are not an infringement on a woman's right to choose, they're about religion or states' rights. Or when we're told that restricting emergency contraception isn't about limiting women's ability to make her own family planning decision, it's somehow about protecting pharmacists. Or like last month, when a Republican state lawmaker in Missouri introduced legislation to triple the state's mandatory waiting period for abortion services, claiming it would give women more time to do their, quote, research. And not that we should be surprised, he went on then to compare this deeply personal choice and difficult choice to that of purchasing an automobile, saying, "In making a decision to buy a car, I put research in there to find out what to do." Well, Mr. President, the truth is that this is an attempt to limit a woman's ability to access care. This is about women. Instead of playing a game of political football with women and their health, Republicans should consider instead joining with us in working on what women truly want. Women today want to have a fair shot at success. First and foremost, that means not rolling back the clock or eroding the gains we've made. We took a very good step forward with the Affordable Care Act, which now prevents insurance companies from charging women more than men for coverage and ensuring preventive services like mammograms and contraception coverage is covered. Increasing access to comprehensive health coverage thanks to the Medicaid expansion and the exchanges. And there is no doubt that we need to make sure that women have access in this country to opportunities, like getting equal pay for equal work, or giving women, the millions of women earning the minimum wage, just a raise would go a long way towards that effort. And we do need to update our tax code so that mothers who are returning to the workforce do not face a marriage penalty today. There is much more that we can be doing to address the issues of concern to women. Those are the issues we ought to be focused on, how to move our country forward, not backward. So, Mr. President, if it wasn't clear the last time the senior senator from South Carolina attempted this, it ought to be clear now. Senators like me are not going anywhere. Advocates and doctors who treat those women every day and know their health must be protected are not going anywhere. And women who continue to believe their health care decisions are theirs and theirs alone are not going to go anywhere. And by the way, the Constitution is not going to go anywhere. And therefore, this extreme bill that was offered today is not going anywhere. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.